Hey folks, alt leveling is in a bit of an interesting spot during the War Within pre-patch, as we have multiple completely different methods to choose from. In this video, I'll discuss the pros and cons of the three main leveling methods, which are Miss Pandaria Remix, the Radiant Echoes pre-patch event, and the standard Chromie Time questing route. I'll start by touching upon Mop Remix, which ends in 10 days at the time of posting this video. It should come as little surprise that this is still technically the fastest leveling method, but there is a catch here. If you've been following my countless guides for Mop Remix over the last few months, you may already know that by creating a level 20 twink, you're able to consistently boost your own characters in under 2 hours. With the pre-patch, nothing about this method has fundamentally changed. In fact, the XP squish from levels 60 to 70 only made the process faster. While the average leveling time for most players used to be roughly 2 to 3 hours, tons of people have told me that they can reliably level from 10 to 70 in under an hour after the pre-patch. This is still unquestionably the fastest current leveling method, but it also assumes that you've already built your own level 20 twink. Setting up this character does require a bit of additional investment, but I've demonstrated multiple times by now that you can easily begin boosting heroic dungeons on your very own twink in as little as 2 to 3 hours after character creation. This means that the initial time investment to build the twink character may still be worth it if you plan on leveling multiple characters before the launch of the War Within. I'll touch back on this method at the end of the video once we've seen the leveling times for the other two methods, but I also think it's worth noting that Mop Remix contains countless limited time cosmetic items that may never return once the event is over. Even if you only have a few days to play through this event before it's finished, you'll still be able to purchase tons of transmog, mounts, and pets simply by leveling up characters. Every time you reach level 70 on a new Mop Remix character, you're able to immediately earn 40,000 bronze, which is the main currency used to purchase items. If you follow my leveling guides, this is actually the most efficient bronze farming method in the game, so you'll be able to buy all of the items you want while getting some free level 70 characters in the process. Next up, we'll discuss the Radiant Echoes pre-patch event, which has been a bit of a roller coaster since its release last week. When it first came out, this event was horrifically bad, but due to extreme backlash, Blizzard heavily reworked it. For about 24 hours, the event was then really good, then it got nerfed late at night on Friday and was complete trash over the weekend, only to receive yet another buff on Tuesday which brought it back to being a fantastic leveling method. I'm giving you this backstory so you understand that it's entirely possible Blizzard may nerf the event again, but at the time of posting this video, it's in a very good spot. After the Tuesday changes, I completed 2 test runs where I leveled from 10 to 70 within Radiant Echoes. The first run did not use anything from the Darkmoon Fair, including the 10% XP buff, and it took me just over 3 hours. On my second run, I opted to use the Darkmoon Fair buff, Darkmoon quest items, and Dragonflight crafted experience, just to make it as comparable as possible to my normal Chromie Time speedruns. I was able to level this character from 10 to 70 in 2 hours and 29 minutes, making this without a doubt the fastest pre-patch event for leveling that we've ever had. As for how to efficiently level with this event, most of it is fairly straightforward. You fly around the active zone and complete bonus objectives until the boss spawns. Then you kill the boss and the process repeats. Pretty much anyone can half AFK their way through this event and mindlessly level up characters, though there are a few optimizations I'll share if you want to level through the event as quickly as I am. For starters, I generally recommend skipping Dragonflight whenever it's the active zone. The other two zones, Searing Gorge and Dustwallow Marsh, are very comparable, though I'd argue that Searing Gorge is marginally faster on average. Dragonblight is a much larger zone, so travel time slows you down a lot more, and most of the events are very inefficient. Compared to other leveling methods, the Radiant Echoes and Dragonblight aren't bad per se, but I'd argue that it's still a better use of your time to do something else for 1 hour and then return once the event cycles back to Searing Gorge. The rest of my optimization simply boils down to knowing which objectives are easy to complete and which ones you should avoid entirely. I'll go through each of these 3 zones and discuss the objectives from best to worst, but one universal tip I can give is that mini-boss events are almost always better than the rest because they grant bonus experience. As long as you tag the mini-boss before it dies, you'll get an additional chunk of XP roughly equivalent to 1/3 of the amount awarded by the objective itself. This means that if it looks like 2 equally efficient events will end up finishing at exactly the same time, you should prioritize mini-boss events to maximize your experience earned. So Searing Gorge is far and away the best zone, and the top 2 events undoubtedly are Stitches and the Leper Gnome Obliteration. Stitches obviously being an elite, which is normally a good event, and he is just the easiest and fastest elite to kill. As for Leper Gnome Obliteration, the progress bar in this one fills up incredibly quickly. There are tons of little mobs down here that you can kill. There is also this rare mob, the Remembered Pummeler, where if it happens to die in time, it usually doesn't, but sometimes it does, you get a bit of bonus XP. It's like half the experience of a mini-boss, which is still passable, and because of how close this one is to Stitches, a lot of times people will just be here super quickly, and this generally speaking gets cleared just as fast. Now, the other two fastest events, in my opinion, and they're very close, are Poison Pumpkins and Hakar. Hakar, obviously, is an elite. He dies usually very quickly. The only downside to him, and why I think he tends to be a little bit slower than the others, is he is all the way off in the corner, and he has an ability which mind controls and stuns people. Sometimes, if you get really unlucky with scaling, it can actually kill you, and I have, on one occasion, been killed when Hakar was at 1%, and then I missed credit. So, in cases like this, where both Hakar and Stitches are up at the same time, it's usually better to just go for Stitches, because Hakar is much further away from all of the other good events, and, well, there's more of a chance of missing credit. Now, as for the pumpkins, this one is actually really fast. You can just run around, click on the pumpkins, and it gets done incredibly quickly. I've noticed that a lot of people tend to overlook this one compared to some of the others, so if your group just isn't prioritizing it, it may get done a bit slower, but I would actually argue it is almost as fast as the other ones we've already discussed. Next, I would say Hogger is probably the fastest, but he is a little bit of a weird case because of this buff, which causes him to take 50% less damage until you finish quests, which are these things over here. The problem is, doing these quests a lot of times is incredibly tedious, especially if nobody else in your group is helping you with it. So, in many groups, they just end up DPSing Hogger down through the 50% damage reduction, which makes him take significantly longer to die relative to every single other elite event. He's still one of the faster events in Searing Gorge, definitely more than some of the others, but it's not the best. The only reason why I'm putting this ahead of some of the others we're going to discuss is because it is still an elite, so you still get the bonus experience upon killing him, and if people do actually handle the quest mechanic properly, it's not that bad. The final passable event is over here. It's South Shore versus Terran Mill. You just kill a bunch of mobs, pretty straightforward. The only downside to that one is that relative to a lot of the other events, like, say, Leper Gnome Obliteration, the mobs in the South Shore versus Terran Mill event give way less percent. I think it could probably use a minor buff, and then it would be okay, but it just ends up being a lot slower than most of the other events in this zone. Now, by far, the three worst events are, in order, Green Hill Zone, Impossibly Rare Boar Liver of Pristine Perfection, and Scalding Morn Brew. All three of these are roughly equal in terms of how bad they are, and this is the only situation where Searing Gorge can get a little bit crappy, because none of these three events get finished. It takes forever. Scalding Morn Brew sometimes appears at the start of the event and goes the entire way until the boss without getting finished. It's just a crap event, easily the worst one out of any three zones. Green Hill Zone is incredibly RNG, same with the Boar Liver, so most people don't bother with these two. And sometimes you end up in situations where you get these three, and you get Hogger, and it bounces back and forth between that and South Shore. That is when Searing Gorge is at its worst. That doesn't happen super often, but it can. In this case, actually, the rare case of Morn Brew getting finished. But normally that doesn't happen. Now, you may be wondering why I've said that Searing Gorge is the fastest, considering I just got done explaining how all of these three events are really bad. But the thing about it is there is so little travel time across all of the events of the zone. It is extremely small compared to both Dragonflight and Dustwallow. So provided you don't get unbelievably bad RNG, you're able to just quickly move around the three objectives in the center, Pumpkins, Stitches, and Leper Gnomes, and get incredible XP while that persists. And even if you get a little bit bad RNG, and you have to move back from Hakar to Hogger, to Hakar again, to South Shore to free up the good events, it is, at worst, roughly comparable to Dustwallow Marsh. So in the end, I think it is still fair to say that this is the fastest of the three zones. Within Dustwallow Marsh, the three best events that you can do are pretty much equally the boss events, so King Mosh, King Gordok, and Gazrilla over here. The only issue is that if multiple of them are up at once, especially King Mosh and Gazrilla, it can be a little bit difficult to get from one to the other, and sometimes they both die at exactly the same time. The next fastest are events like Zen's Bidding or Swamp Eyes Spider Eyes. I would say that between these two and Deviate Delights or Lazy Peons, it's a little bit tricky to say what's faster. A lot of times, the fastest one to complete more so depends on how many people are there rather than the event itself, but I have noticed that Deviate Delights out of these four generally takes the longest to finish. Finally, the last two events are Crystal Power and Quelling Quillbore, and it's a bit of a weird case here, because while Quelling Quillbore is arguably about as fast as these other events down south, it's really isolated, so very few people actually go here, and as a result, it tends to be one of the slowest events to complete. That being said, Crystal Power is far and away the slowest event in all of Duskwalla Marsh, and I would pretty much avoid standing here and waiting for it to finish unless it's already at like 95% and there's only one crystal left to go. So for Northrend, as I said before, this is by far the worst of the three zones, and I would normally recommend skipping it. However, if you do choose to level through this, there are definitely some events that are better than others. The top two are probably going to be Thorim, this one, and the Tadpoles one. Thorim is a little bit weird because while he is an elite that does take very little time to kill, which is normally good, he turns friendly before the event ends, which means that you don't actually get the mob kill experience from him. This is the only elite where that actually happens. But he does die really quickly, even with a little bit of RP at the end, so it's still technically one of the fastest events. The Tadpoles all die really quickly, this one is very fast. After that, the next two fastest events are probably a toss-up between the Jaraxxus one and Prophet of Seratus. Generally speaking, Jaraxxus is very quick once he's actually spawned, but there is a ton of roleplay before that, which makes this event pretty slow. This one is pretty fast, but it's just a little bit more spread out than some of the other events, so tends to be a bit slower. And after that, the efficiency of all of the other events just tanks drastically. The other elite events are all exceptionally slow. Lumber Collection is maybe the fastest, but this is more to do with its proximity to a lot of the other fast ones like Seratus, Tadpoles, Thorim, and Jaraxxus, so more people tend to complete this one. But Webbed Crusaders bugs out very often and takes forever to complete. By Fire Be Purged is extremely slow, and I do not think I've ever actually seen a Blade Fit for a Champion complete. I've personally never gone down to complete it, because even if it is about to finish, it is so far away from every single other event that almost universally, whenever this one is up, you're just going to get more event completions by sticking around this area instead of going all the way down here and then going all the way back. The last elite event is Champion's Call, which, while technically a bit faster than By Fire Be Purged, A Blade Fit for a Champion, or Webbed Crusaders, is still, without a doubt, the slowest elite event comparable to Hogger. The problem is, there are 3 different mobs that you actually need to kill in order to complete this event, and as a result, it's usually really inefficient to complete, and the only reliable way to get experience from this is trying to fly over it right as the final of the 3 bosses dies, which can be a little bit tricky, especially since it's a bit further off to the east than any other event. Overall, while Northrend has the potential to match the other 2 zones, if you continually get something like Thorim, Tadpoles, Seratus, Jaraxxus, etc., and just ping-pong between all of them until the boss spawns, a lot of times this doesn't happen. A lot of times you end up in situations like this, where the worst possible events are up at the same time, and they are so spread out that it takes forever to actually complete this cycle and get it back to a potentially good cluster up in the north over here. So, on average, Northrend will just be considerably slower, and again, I would recommend not wasting your time with this. Go take a break, go make food, go make coffee, and then come back once it rolls back around to Searing Gorge. Before we move on to the final leveling method, I also want to note that Radiant Echoes is a great option for anyone interested in gearing up their alts for early expansion leveling. Each character will earn roughly 40 to 50k of the event currency by the time they've reached level 70, and this is about as much as it costs to purchase a full set of 480 item level gear. It may not be worth it to invest in gearing every single character you level, but having some starter gear before you enter the War Within will make the leveling process significantly easier. I recently did a run on the beta where I leveled a template character that starts at 408 item level, and things get really painful towards the end once your gear starts to lag behind. The pre-patch event gear will probably get fully replaced by the time you reach level 75 or 76, but it'll still make the early experience a lot smoother. Finally, we have my standard Chromie Time questing route that has been a reliable way to level since Shadowlands. In this pre-patch, very little actually changes when it comes to which zones are efficient in Chromie Time, and things even get a bit faster thanks to dragon riding being available at level 10. I plan on posting an updated 10 to 70 Chromie Time guide closer to War Within's release, and I've already finished multiple test runs for both Horde and Alliance. Unfortunately, as things currently stand, Chromie Time leveling can't quite compare to the speed of either Mop Remix or Radiant Echoes. The most unfortunate thing is that, at the time of posting this video, Blizzard has actually forgotten to update the Chromie Time leveling ranges, so you still get kicked out the moment you reach level 61. This forces you to level through Dragonflight for the final 9 levels, and while zones such as Azurspan aren't bad, they don't stack up to anything from the standard route. Even if this bug does get fixed soon, I still can't see Chromie Time being a faster method of leveling for the average player, and you don't get any special rewards like the ones from Remix or Radiant Echoes. The good news is that, based on my testing, the existing Chromie Time route from 10 to 70 will end up being even faster in the War Within than it was from 10 to 60 in Dragonflight. Once all of these limited time events are gone, alt leveling will still be faster next expansion than it has ever been before. Before I end the video, I want to quickly summarize the speeds and extra bonuses of each of the 3 methods, as well as provide my recommendation for which one you should use depending on how many characters you want to level up before the War Within. For Mop Remix, your second character onwards will consistently take 1 to 2 hours, and you're able to earn tons of cosmetics in the process. However, your first character won't have unlocked the 100% experience bonus, so that will take closer to 5 hours. You'll also need to set up a level 20 twink if you haven't done so already, which can take about 3 hours. In summary, I'd only recommend this method if you already have a level 20 twink built, or if you want to level 6 or more brand new characters before the launch of the expansion. For Radiant Echoes, every player can reliably level from 10 to 70 in 3 to 4 hours with no prior setup. Along the way, you'll also earn currency that can be used to buy 480 catch-up gear and some cosmetic rewards. I'd recommend that all returning players level at least 1 character through this method, as that will allow them to begin preparing their gear for launch day leveling. Otherwise, this method is recommended if you only want to level around 1 to 5 characters before the War Within. Lastly, this is the best way to reach level 70 on any partially leveled characters that you have left over from previous expansions. Finally, Chromie Time is not a recommended leveling method during its current state, but I will have an updated guide for it posted by the launch of the next expansion. If you want to see me level characters using any of these 3 methods, I've included links to those videos in the description below. If you found this video helpful, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could toss it a like, as that'll help other people find it as well.